I'm Amber Wilson. I'm 32, and my own parents sued me for refusing to pay my sister's mortgage. It started with a letter, my name, tied to a $480,000 debt I never agreed to. When I called them in shock, their response? We've decided. You should cover it for Heather. When I said no, they dragged me to court. What happened next? Tore our family apart. Before I explain how it all spiraled, tell me, where are you watching from? If this kind of story resonates with you, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep telling the stories that matter. Let's begin. I thought it was just another piece of junk mail, until I saw my name tied to a $480,000 debt I never agreed to. I stood by the kitchen counter, sifting through the usual pile of bills and credit card offers, my mind still half focused on the quarterly report I'd been finalizing at work. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, with an official-looking return address, Massachusetts Bay Mortgage Company. Probably some promotional loan offer, I thought. I nearly tossed it straight into the recycling bin. But then I caught sight of my name. Not just my name, my full legal name in bold, at the top of what appeared to be a mortgage disclosure statement. I flipped through the papers with trembling fingers. Loan amount: $480,000. Monthly payment: $2,850. Loan term: 30 years. Property address: 247 Oakwood Drive, Winchester. I froze. I hadn't applied for a mortgage. I hadn't even toured a property in Winchester. The panic started low in my stomach, then climbed to my chest like a rising tide. I sat down hard at the dining table, heart pounding in my ears. Every worst-case scenario slammed into me at once. Identity theft, financial ruin, destroyed credit. My breathing went shallow. I closed my eyes and forced myself to inhale deeply. I grabbed my phone and dialed the mortgage company's customer service line, but after 3 rings, I got an automated message. Our office hours are Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Of course, it was already past 6. My hands shook as I scrolled through my contacts, landing on Mom. For a split second, I hesitated. Calling her usually meant opening a door I wasn't ready to walk through. Memories flooded back. Every time she'd called asking for help with Heather. The time Heather's car broke down and I was guilted into paying $800 for repairs, even though I was still living off ramen and budgeting every cent toward my student loans. The countless moments when I told myself, this is the last time. But this wasn't a few $100s. This was my entire future. The line rang twice before she picked up. Amber, what a nice surprise. Mom, I just got something in the mail. Mortgage documents. In my name. For a house I've never even seen. A pause. Then, in her usual airy tone, oh, you got them already? That's good. I blinked. What do you mean, that's good? What is going on? Her voice shifted, turning just slightly patronizing. Amber, honey, this really isn't a phone conversation. Why don't you come home for dinner? Your father and Heather will be here. We'll explain everything then. I stood up, pacing across the room. Mom, this isn't some family gossip session. This is fraud. My name is on a $500,000 loan. She sighed like I was being overly dramatic. You're overreacting. Just come home. 6 o'clock. We'll talk then. Before I could say another word, she hung up. I stared at my phone in disbelief, thumb hovering over the callback button. But something told me it was useless. I grabbed my car keys. The drive from Boston to Connecticut felt longer than usual, even though I'd done it dozens of times over the years for birthdays, holidays, and guilt-tripped weekends. The highway blurred past as my mind spun through every possibility, none of them good. My logical brain, the one that had built a career in finance, screamed that there had to be a reasonable explanation, but the sinking weight in my gut told me otherwise. By the time I turned onto my parents' street, dusk was settling. Their house looked exactly as I remembered. White shutters, manicured lawn, the porch light glowing warmly like a beacon. A place that should have felt like home but didn't. Heather's car was already in the driveway. A relatively new Honda Civic, the same one Mom and Dad had co-signed for 2 years ago. My stomach twisted tighter. I parked by the curb, turned off the ignition, and sat for a moment, staring at the front door. Through the living room window, I could make out three silhouettes. My parents sitting side by side on the couch. Heather in the armchair, hunched over her phone. They were waiting for me. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a misunderstanding. I sat in the living room like a defendant awaiting sentencing. Only there was no judge, just my family. The air felt heavy, like it hadn't been refreshed in days. The smell of old furniture polish and last night's reheated dinner clung to the curtains. My father sat rigidly in his usual armchair, one leg crossed tightly over the other, hands steepled like he was preparing for a boardroom pitch. My mother perched at the edge of the couch, hands folded neatly in her lap, but fingers twitching against her skirt. Heather sat across from me, curled in on herself like some tragic protagonist in a made-for-TV drama, eyes downcast, lips trembling just enough to sell vulnerability. No one spoke for several seconds. The clock on the mantel ticked louder than it had any right to. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "Amber, I know this must be confusing for you." I let out a bitter laugh. "Confusing? Try terrifying." My mother offered a sympathetic but rehearsed smile. "That's why we asked you here tonight. We wanted to explain in person." She glanced at Heather, who gave a well-timed sniffle but kept her gaze fixed on the floor. My father straightened. "We've talked about it, long and hard. As a family correction," I cut in, "without me." Ignoring that, he pressed on. "We've decided it's time for Heather to have some stability, a home of her own. She's been through a lot these past few years." I blinked at him. "So have I, but somehow I never got a house handed to me." My mother leaned forward, voice soft but edged with steel. "We know you're doing well financially. Your new position, the salary. You're more than capable of helping." Helping? The word tasted like acid. "You mean paying her mortgage? That's what this is about?" Heather's shoulders trembled, but she remained silent, her silence saying more than any outburst could. My father adjusted his tie, as if the weight of the lie had tightened the knot around his throat. "It's not as dramatic as you're making it sound. We simply use some of your old tax records to help secure the loan." I felt like the room tilted sideways. "My tax records?" My voice cracked. "And the signature? My signature on legally binding documents?" My mother's gaze dropped to her hands. "We filled in the paperwork. For you." "For me?" I shot to my feet. "You forged my signature." My father stood, towering over me like he had when I was 16, and dared to question why Heather got a new car while I got a used bike. "Don't use words like that," he barked. "You're making it sound criminal." "Because it is criminal. This is fraud." Heather let out a broken sob from the corner, covering her face. Right on cue. My mother's face darkened, her polite facade cracking. "How dare you speak to us like this after everything we've done for you?" "Done for me?" I laughed, short and bitter. "You mean like the $0 toward my tuition? Or the endless guilt trips to bail Heather out of every mess she's ever made?" "We're family," my father said through clenched teeth. "And family helps family." "By stealing their identity?" I shook my head, bile rising in my throat. "I'm calling the police." That's when she moved. My mother crossed the room in 3 quick steps and grabbed my wrist, her grip deceptively strong for someone her size. She leaned in so close I could smell the faint trace of her perfume, a scent I used to find comforting. Her voice dropped to a whisper, low and venomous. "If you leave now, you're out of this family forever." I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman who had taught me to say please and thank you, who'd packed my school lunches and told me bedtime stories, was now threatening me into silence. And for the first time in my life, I chose to walk away. When I got served at my front door, I realized this wasn't just a bad family argument anymore. It was a gray, humid afternoon in Boston, I had just finished microwaving leftover pasta when the knock came. 2 sharp raps, louder, heavier than normal. I opened the door to find a middle-aged man in a navy windbreaker holding a thick envelope. "Amber Wilson?" he asked. I nodded. "You've been served." He handed me the envelope without ceremony, then turned and disappeared down the hallway. I stood there frozen for a full minute before I closed the door and peeled back the flap. The first words I saw: plaintiffs, Eleanor Wilson and Richard Wilson. Defendant, Amber Wilson. Amount in controversy, $480,000. My vision blurred. I sank to the floor, my back pressed against the door like I could physically keep the world out. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I flashed to a memory. Me at 24, curled up on this same floor, crying after a phone call where my parents told me I was selfish for refusing to help Heather pay off her mounting credit card debt. Back then, I collapsed because I didn't know how to say no. Now, I was collapsing because I had. And this was the price. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. "Jessica." I managed to answer on the third ring, my voice hoarse. "Jess, I just got served." "What? By who?" I exhaled sharply. "My parents. They're suing me for the mortgage." A pause. Then, "Okay. Number, this is insane. I'm leaving work now. I'll meet you in an hour." True to her word, Jessica met me at her tiny paralegal office tucked between a dry cleaner and a bakery in Cambridge. She flipped through the lawsuit papers with growing disbelief. This is textbook financial coercion," she muttered. "Amber, this isn't small claims court stuff. This is nearly $500,000. I nodded, still numb. "I know someone," she added, already grabbing her phone. "Rachel Goldstein. She's a family finance attorney. She's handled cases like this before. I'll get you in." By the next morning, I was sitting in Rachel's office, sleek, minimalist, and intimidatingly professional. Rachel herself was in her early 40s, sharp-eyed with a clipped, no-nonsense tone that somehow made me feel both terrified and oddly safe. She scanned the lawsuit, then sat back, steepling her fingers. "Amber, this isn't just a civil matter. What they did falls under mortgage fraud. That's federal." My throat tightened. "So they could go to jail?" Rachel's gaze softened just a fraction. "That depends. But first, we need to protect you. Immediately. I want copies of every email, text, voicemail, everything. And we're filing a formal fraud report with the mortgage company." I nodded, already feeling the tremors of a panic attack creeping up. That afternoon, the voicemail started. My father, sounding furious. "You're blowing this out of proportion. Drop this nonsense and come home so we can fix it as a family." My mother, in a cracked voice. "Heather hasn't eaten in 2 days, Amber. She's devastated. Please, Horace, stop this." And then Heather... Not directly, of course. No, she took her grievances online. I sat at my desk, staring at my phone screen as her tear-streaked face filled my Instagram feed. The caption read, "When your own sister tries to make you homeless, I just wanted a chance at a normal life." The comments flooded in. Sympathy, outrage. People I hadn't seen since high school reposting her story with hashtags like #FamilyFirst and #StopTheHate. I logged off before I could spiral. Later that week, after another consultation with Rachel, I sat across from a man named Marcus Bennett in a conference room overlooking downtown Boston. His reputation preceded him. Specialist in high-conflict family litigation. He reviewed my case file, tapping his pen against the table. "Miss Wilson, this case is weak on their side. Legally, they don't have a leg to stand on, but they're going to drag you through hell anyway." I swallowed hard. "What do I do?" Marcus slid a retainer contract across the table toward me. "You hire me, and we fight." My hand shook as I signed my name on the dotted line. If they wanted a fight, they just picked the wrong person. If they thought they could scare me into silence, they clearly forgot what I do for a living. I sat across from Marcus in his office, surrounded by towering stacks of legal briefs and case files. The Boston skyline stretched behind him, but I barely noticed. My focus was on the manila folder in front of me, the beginning of my counterattack. Marcus adjusted his glasses and leaned forward. Amber, we're past the reaction stage. Now it's time to build our defense. And offense. That means evidence. Every email, every voicemail, every text. Anything that shows their pattern of manipulation. I nodded, determination hardening inside me. I thought back to my college years, working late shifts at the campus library, calculating every dollar of my student loan balance, mapping out tuition payments while my friends planned spring break trips. If there was one thing I knew how to do, it was gather data under pressure. By the time I got home, the adrenaline had fully kicked in. I pulled out dusty storage bins from my closet, pried open file boxes stacked behind my couch, and emptied every drawer that might contain old records. The apartment filled with the rustle of paper and the sharp smell of forgotten printer ink. At midnight, I unearthed a USB drive labeled Old Taxes. Plugging it into my laptop, I sifted through years of scanned W-2s, 1099s, and correspondence. And there it was. An email from my mother dated 3 years ago. Subject line, "We'll figure something out." Buried deep in the thread was a reply from my father. "Just do it. She won't dare sue us. She's too proud to go that far." My stomach twisted, but I kept going. By 2 a.m, I had a stack of printed emails and screenshots spread across my kitchen table. One thread stood out. The subject line read, "If she refuses, we'll make it a family matter she can't refuse." My hands trembled as I highlighted the phrase, making sure it stood out in neon yellow. There was no more ambiguity. No way for them to spin this as a misunderstanding. The next morning, I met Jessica at our usual coffee shop. She took one look at my overstuffed folder and whistled low. "Remind me never to cross you." "I'm not done yet," I said, sliding the papers across the table. With Jessica's help, I scanned everything and sent the files to Rachel. Within the hour, Rachel replied with additional supporting documents from the mortgage company's fraud investigation. Marcus's office became my second home over the next few days. He reviewed each piece of evidence meticulously. "We are also filing a motion to compel production of electronic records," he said, flipping through the latest batch of printouts. "They're ISP logs, PDF metadata, edit histories. If they doctored anything, we'll know." I exhaled, a mix of exhaustion and relief. Later that night, just as I was organizing the last of the files, my phone buzzed. A text from Grandma Ruth. "I'm proud of you for standing your ground, honey. Stay strong." I blinked back tears I didn't realize were waiting. Sitting at Marcus's conference table the following morning, I handed him the highlighted email. He read it twice, then looked up at me, his expression grim but satisfied. "This isn't just a misunderstanding," Marcus said, looking at the printout. "This is premeditated fraud." The courtroom smelled like stale coffee and desperation, mostly theirs. I sat at the defendant's table, knees locked, hands gripping the edge hard enough to turn my knuckles white. The ceiling fans hummed overhead, barely stirring the thick August air. Connecticut District Court, Courtroom 4, wow. An unremarkable room in an unremarkable building. But today, it felt like the center of my entire universe. My parents sat across the aisle at the plaintiff's table. My father in a stiff gray suit, jaw set like concrete. My mother dabbing at imaginary tears with a tissue that hadn't seen actual moisture all morning. Heather sat between them, head bowed, her hair falling like a curtain over her face. But I caught the sideways glances she kept sneaking at the gallery behind me. Social media damage control, probably. Behind me, in the second row, I caught sight of Grandma Ruth. Small, quiet, but unmistakably present. Her hands folded in her lap, her eyes steady on me. That single presence grounded me more than she could possibly know. Judge Reeves entered at precisely 9 a.m. Her voice cut through the room like a scalpel. "Wilson versus Wilson. Defendant's motion to dismiss with prejudice and motion for sanctions. Let's proceed." Peterson, my parents' attorney, rose first. His voice was smooth, theatrical. Your Honor, this case is not about legal technicalities. It's about family commitments. My clients, Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, acted in good faith, believing their daughter would want to help her sister secure housing. There exists an implied contract, built over years of family expectation and verbal understanding. I felt Marcus shift beside me. I didn't need to look to know he was smiling, sharp and dangerous. When it was his turn, Marcus stood, buttoned his jacket, and stepped forward. Your Honor, let's be clear. This is not a family misunderstanding. This is identity theft. This is forgery. This is harassment. And the plaintiff's own written communications prove premeditated fraud. He walked to the evidence cart and lifted a stack of printed emails, the same ones we'd spent sleepless nights compiling. Judge Reeves flipped through her own copy of the exhibits. Her expression tightened as she reached the highlighted lines. Then came my turn. I walked to the witness stand on legs that felt like lead but held anyway. Sworn in. Sat down. Took a breath. I told them everything. The years of being the responsible daughter, the endless financial rescues, the forged documents, the voicemails, the smear campaigns. I stared straight ahead, never once looking toward my parents. Peterson tried to rattle me on cross-examination. Miss Wilson, he said, voice syrupy sweet, isn't it true that you've consistently prioritized your career over your family obligations? I stared at him. I prioritized not going bankrupt over cleaning up after my sister. The courtroom murmured. Judge Reeves gave a sharp rap of her gavel. Proceed. Heather took the stand next. She spoke in a small, broken voice, painting herself as the innocent victim caught between warring parties. But when Marcus cross-examined her, the cracks appeared. So, Miss Wilson, he said, flipping through a printed Instagram post. On July 3rd, while this lawsuit was pending, you posted a photo captioned, "So blessed. Thanks, Mom and Dad, for making my dream home happen." Does that sound like someone who believed her sister was willingly buying her a house? Heather fumbled. I was emotional. I didn't mean it like that. And yet, 2 days later, you posted this. He held up another page. Some people are just jealous of what others have. Care to explain who you meant? She went silent. The final blow came when Marcus submitted the chain of emails between my parents, the ones openly discussing forging my signature, manipulating me into compliance, and banking on my reluctance to cause a family scandal. Judge Reeves adjusted her glasses and looked directly at my parents. I've reviewed the motions, the evidence, and the testimonies. This case was not filed in good faith. It is dismissed with prejudice. Sanctions are granted against the plaintiffs and their attorney. Additionally, a temporary restraining order is hereby approved. The plaintiffs are barred from contacting the defendant for 90 days, pending further review. The gavel hit the bench. As the sound echoed through the courtroom, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Relief. Winning felt nothing like I imagined. But losing myself had never been an option. The official court letter arrived on a Thursday afternoon, sealed with the county clerk's stamp. I sat on my new living room floor, back against the wall of my 2-bedroom condo, and stared at the words until they blurred. Case closed. Sanctions enforced. Legal fees partially awarded to the defendant. I let out a slow, shaky breath. Not a full reimbursement, nowhere near, but enough to feel like the system hadn't ignored the months of financial hemorrhaging I'd endured. A congratulatory email from Marcus landed in my inbox that evening. You fought harder than most would. Be proud of that. I smiled for the first time all day. September faded into October, and I poured my energy into rebuilding, both my bank account and my sense of safety. Automatic deposits resumed into my emergency fund. I made my first full contribution to my 401k in nearly a year. The weight pressing on my chest began to lift, millimeter by millimeter. One Saturday morning, a small package arrived without warning. Inside was the wooden jewelry box from my childhood, the one I'd assumed had been lost or tossed during one of my mother's cleaning sprees. Tucked inside, a note written in Ruth's familiar cursive, This belongs with you. Love always, Grandma. I held it against my chest longer than I'd like to admit, the corners pressing into my skin like an anchor. Later that week, my inbox chimed with an email from Uncle Paul. Subject: You did it, Amber. I've been following everything from a distance. You broke the cycle the rest of us couldn't. Whatever comes next for you, you've already won more than you know. Paul. The tears came fast this time, but they felt different. Not hopeless, not defeated, just clean, like rain after too many heavy clouds. At the coffee shop where Jessica and I had once spread out my lawsuit papers in sheer panic, I now sat with a warm latte and an open laptop. Across from me, Jessica grinned. So, when are you telling your story publicly? I hesitated. I'm not sure I'm ready for that. She raised an eyebrow. You already are. You just don't know it. That night, back at home, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hi, Amber. I'm Rachel. From the support group. I just wanted to say thanks for your story. I froze my credit today. And I filed a police report. First time I've stood up to my parents. You made me brave enough. I stared at the message, heart swelling with something close to awe. Sliding my chair up to my desk, I opened a new document on my laptop. My fingers hovered over the keys, then began to type. To anyone struggling with family financial abuse, you're not alone. And no matter what they've told you, protecting yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. As I hit save and closed my laptop, I stood by the window of my new home, looking out at the city lights. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. The scars from betrayal lingered, but the silence that followed the gavel felt like the first deep breath after drowning. What began as a quiet pattern of manipulation ended in a courtroom where truth, at last, spoke louder than history. Justice may not erase the damage, but it redefines the balance of power for those brave enough to demand it. And sometimes, the greatest victory isn't watching the guilty fall. It's knowing you'll never let them pull you down again.